think we can start. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves with the ex parte contacts. We'll have to stop at that point if they're not here. But I think I can start the rest of the script though. Good evening and welcome to the May 18th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Chris Ramey and I'm the chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the Planning Commission to meet, hear from the community, and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. Tonight, we will be holding 2 public hearings on appeals of recent hearing official decisions. The first public hearing is for an appeal of the hearings official's decision approving the Harmon and Gentry zone change, City File Z20-9. The second public hearing is for an appeal of the hearings official's decision approving the Laurel Ridge PUD, City File PDT 18-3. Before we begin our first public hearing for the Harmon and Gentry zone change, the Eugene Code requires the planning commissioners to disclose any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, biases, or abstentions. In a quasi-judicial proceeding like this one, the parties are entitled to an impartial or neutral decision maker. To ensure this fair consideration, the Eugene Code and Planning Commission's rules attempt to limit ex parte contacts or communications between a party and the decision maker outside of the public hearing process. Each planning commissioner must disclose and describe the substance of any communication they have had about this application outside the public process. The planning commissioners must also disclose any conflicts of interest, that is, whether the decision they are about to make could or would result in a personal financial gain to themselves, their business, or a member of their household. Finally, a planning commissioner cannot participate if he or she is biased. That is, if for whatever reason, he or she is incapable of rendering an objective decision on this appeal. We will repeat this process for the Laurel Ridge PUD after the Harmon and Gentry appeal hearing has concluded. Now, having said that, who do we have in attendance? Are we still short a couple members, correct? But we're expecting them, also correct. So I think we should
just real quick, we're not expecting Commissioner Borofsky, but we are expecting both Commissioner
Taylor and Edwards
and Taylor.
Well, I think if they want to participate, we need to wait and get them through the ex parte process. Yes. Lauren Summers.
Thank you. You could ask the commissioners present whether they need to disclose any ex parte contact, and then when Commissioners Taylor and Edwards join, stop for a second and ask them the same question.
Okay. Terrific. So and I'm going to ask any commissioners whether they have any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or abstentions pursuant to EC 9.7065 to disclose. Raise your hands now. I'm not seeing anyone raising their hands. And have staff received any challenges to a commissioner's impartiality submitted pursuant to Eugene Code section 9.7065 parentheses 5 on parentheses? No.
We have not.
Okay. So we've gotten through the 4 of us that are here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I can go ahead then with the.
I think the Commissioner might be in now. She said she's in, but not popping up.
That's fine. You know what? I can go ahead and read the role of the Planning Commission, and then we'll pause after that, and we'll circle back to them. I think they'll be here, I hope, by then. Okay. I'd like to take a moment to explain who the Planning Commission is and our role. We are unpaid volunteers appointed by the Eugene City Council to 4-year terms on the commission. We all live and work in Eugene, like many of you. We directly advise our city council on all matters related to land use, and we are also tasked with making certain land use decisions on behalf of our city council. We're responsible for upholding the laws of the city and our state, the policies of our city council, and of course, at the same time, we're also responsible to everyone that lives and works in Eugene. We are at-large members, which means we have to consider the needs of the community as a whole, as well as the needs of all groups and neighborhoods. We're also human beings, which means each one of us has personal views that make us who we are. But as planning commissioners, we're committed to balancing all of our needs as a community and to making the best decisions we possibly can based on our policies and our laws for us and for future generations. That can be pretty tough to do, and we know not everyone will agree with every decision we make. So as we proceed today, we want you to know up front that we are listening and that we care deeply about you and about our community. We will listen carefully to your concerns and your hopes. Even if we cannot do what you want, know that you will be heard and that we will strive to make the best decision possible. Some of the terms we have to use are legalistic, so I'll try to explain the requirements in plain English the best I can. Since these are appeal hearings, there are unique procedures which we are legally required to follow. The decision of the Planning Commission on the appeals is considered quasi-judicial, so we will use a quasi-judicial format in this public hearing. This means we have a certain order of speakers that we need to follow, and there are certain rules or criteria that our decision must be based upon. The purpose of the hearings tonight is to receive relevant testimony on the appeals before us. And I want to remind everyone that your testimony must be directed toward the issues identified in the appeals statements and the approval criteria from the Eugene Code applicable to each appeal. No new evidence can be accepted by the Planning Commission, and any arguments you make should be related to evidence that is already in the record. What this means is that you should be testifying about 1, the materials and information already presented to the hearings official in the first public hearing process, and 2, whether or not you think the hearings official made a mistake based on the applicable approval criteria. I also want to remind everyone that the failure to raise an issue with enough specificity to allow the Planning Commission and other parties to respond will preclude future appeals on that issue. In other words, now is your opportunity to raise issues as clearly as you can so that the city and other parties can address them. Those wishing to speak during the Harmon and Gentry zone change appeal hearing will be asked to virtually raise your hand. Now I'm going to pause here and circle back. I saw some movement in the Hollywood Squares section over here. We do. Okay, so the two commissioners that have joined us, we went through the ex parte and impartiality sections. I'm going to repeat those with you now. So do either of you have any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or abstentions pursuant to EC 9.7065 to disclose?
I do not.
No. Okay, good. Have staff received any challenges to either of these commissioners' impartiality submitted pursuant to Eugene Code Section 9.7065 parentheses 5 on parentheses?
We have not.
You have not. Okay, very good. Lauren, did we do it? Okay, good. So now, those wishing to speak during the Harmon and Gentry zone change, which is our first hearing this evening, will be asked to virtually raise your hand. I understand from staff that the applicant and the appellants have each arranged for up to 20 minutes total for their presentations. And I will ask that individuals other than the applicant and the appellant limit their testimony to 3 minutes to allow everyone a chance to speak this evening. There are different ways to raise your hand depending on how you are participating. For those joining on a computer, tablet, or other smart device, you can raise your hand by clicking the virtual hand icon at the bottom of the screen or by opening the participant window. For those joining by phone, please dial *9, after which you should hear audio confirmation of your hand being raised. If you wish to speak regarding the first appeal hearing, and that's the Harmon and Gentry zone change, and you have not already raised your virtual hand, please raise your virtual hand now. If you're here for the second appeal hearing, and that's the Laurel Ridge issue, please wait until we call for testimony on that later this evening. The Planning Commission's decision will be the final city decision on this matter. If there are any further appeals after our decision, they will go to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. Before we start the hearing for the Harmon and Gentry zone change, I want to thank everyone again for your patience, flexibility, and good humor as we work within this virtual meeting format. Now we're going to have a staff presentation from Nick, Associate Planner, who will provide an overview of the appeal and the application at hand. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Nick Gioiello, Associate Planner, and I'm going to share my screen and put up a PowerPoint presentation here. And, there we go. And so this is the appeal of the Eugene hearings official decision on the Greg Harmon and Linda Gentry zone change. City file is Z20-9. Next page. Keep in mind that I'm limited to the items that were introduced into the record back in when we did this hearing. So this is what I have to work with. So here's a vicinity map, and you can see the red dashed or red lined property in the center. And I think I can turn on my laser pointer here. Here we go. And this is the portion of the property. And there's a couple of things I want to make clear that are issues that might not come through as well in the staff report and in the hearings official decision, but that this portion of the property is part of a much bigger property. It's all one parcel, and I'm kind of highlighting part of it that you can see here. It's much bigger than what's shown on this page. This is a large property. The thing to know about this part over here is this is outside of the city limits, outside of the UGB. It's under Lane County jurisdiction. And so the border is right here, and you can see the line here for our UGB and our city limits. This portion of the property is the only portion we're dealing with. And I just wanted to make that clear so that everybody understood and we're all on the same page. The other thing that comes up, I noticed as I was going through this, is there's a reference to the name Old Coburg Road, which is this portion of the road right here. And then this piece of the road that comes off is also called Old Coburg Road. We refer to it throughout our materials as the western frontage to differentiate this part of Old Coburg Road from this part of Old Coburg Road that intersects with North Game Farm. I just wanted to make that clear because it's possible that can be confusing for anybody, not just commission members, but also for the public. So this is a view of the zoning, the immediate zoning around this property. And as you can see, the Hawthorne Estate subdivision in this area is zoned R1, which is low density single family. And then you have some R2 right here, which is medium density. This is I believe this is a Stonegate or something apartments. And then there's E2 campus industrial here, as well as E1, or campus employment, and E2 is mixed use employment. So the appeal was filed on behalf of the Hawthorne Estates Lot Owners Association. And there were 6 appeal issues. I'm just going to run through the appeal issues real quick. Keep in mind tonight, this is only for the public input part of this. We'll be doing deliberations on all of these issues in upcoming meetings. The first one is scheduled, I think, for the 24th at 11:30. We'll have some more information on that. the first two appeal issues deal specifically with this portion of the code criteria, which is EC 98865, and it deals with the Metro Plan. I'm not going to read the verbiage here. Everybody can do that, but it's about the written text of the Metro Plan. Issue number 3 dealt with the second criteria in the zone change criteria, which is consistency with our refinement plan. In this case, that's the Willa area plan. Issue number 4 related to another part of the zone change criteria, and that is that uses and densities will be allowed by the proposed zoning, and the location of the proposed change can be served through the orderly extension of key urban facilities and services. When I talk about the appeal issues, I'll talk about what this one means. A little bit more detail. Issue number 5 was related to commercial zone siting requirements, and that part of the criteria leads you to another section of the code, which is 9.2150, and that specifically is about having an adequate support population and the ability for people to get to and from the site, both pedestrians and bicycles. The last issue related back to, in a way, back to the Willa area plan, but it's really specifically about the Willa area plan policy number 2 that discusses requiring site review overlay zone be applied for commercial properties. Okay. And so the specific appeal issues that were filed, these are the actual words that were used in the appeal that was filed. So appeal issue 1 was about the hearing's official erring in determining that the campus industrial designation is identified on a refinement plan and does not negate in any way limit the zoning allowed under the Metro Plan. And for those who are new to this, what we're talking about is the Metro Plan sets up designations throughout the city for what should be there, but it's not the actual zoning. So when it says campus industrial, it can mean several things. Appeal issue number 2 is that the hearings official erred determining that the Metro Plan text related to neighborhood commercial takes precedence over the, and I have to move the, takes precedence over the parcel specific campus industrial plan designation of the subject property without identifying any apparent conflicts between the plan text and the plan diagram. And I'm not going to go, we're going to get into these things at the deliberation. So I thought I'd just hit on these appeal issues real quick. Appeal issue number 3 was that the zone change to C1 was in direct conflict with the Willa area plan policy. The city shall allow for a gradual transition of the subject property from residential to industrial use. Appeal issue number 4, and this was the one I was talking about facilities, is that the hearings official erred determining that the surrounding transportation system can be extended to serve the uses and density allowed under the C1 zone, and that the zone change will not significantly affect an existing transportation facility. And that's pursuant to an Oregon revised statute, which is really what we call our transportation planning rule. Appeal issue number 5, the hearings official misinterpreted C1 zone siting requirements requiring the terms convenient walking and bicycling distance and the adequate support population that I mentioned earlier. And then 6, that the hearings official erred by approving the zone change to C1 without concurrently applying the site review zoning overlay. So for tonight, we're going to hear presentations both from the applicant who represents this application, or the applicant's representative, and also from the appellant, and also from the public. So wanted to put up a reminder of what evidence and is in our definitions. And really the key thing, you can read this, but really the key thing for tonight is what the Planning Commission is going to do is listen to everyone carefully, as already been stated by the chairman. And what they'll do at deliberations is go through all the testimony that's been received, both what comes in tonight, and also there's been a few documents that have been filed by some of the public and also the appellants and the applicant. And we will go through those pieces of testimony as well as what is said tonight, and a determination will be made. And really the two key pieces to remember are that your testimony has to be relevant to these appeal issues that were filed. They have to somehow plug into the 6 appeal issues. The other key thing is that they can't introduce any new evidence that hasn't been placed into the record already. So that if you're talking about some kind of a previous plan or something that was never mentioned and the hearings official never had a chance to look at that information, it may be decided that that has to be excluded from the testimony. And that's what will happen. That will be part of what happens in our deliberations in the future. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn this back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. Now I would like to open the public hearing of the Eugene Planning Commission on the Harmon and Gentry Zone Change Appeal, City File Z20-9. As a reminder, raise your hand. Please click, if you want to raise your hand, click on the hand icon. If you're joining by phone, please dial *9. Please, and as you begin your testimony, please give us your name and address before beginning your testimony, and let us know if you are in favor, neutral, or opposed to the hearing's official decision approving the zone change application. As a reminder, public testimony is limited to 3 minutes for all parties other than the applicant and the appellant. To help keep time, we'll have Commissioner Basin raise his hand when your time has ended. Thank you, Commissioner Basin. The applicant will speak first, then we will hear testimony from the appellants and then from others. The applicant will also be given a final opportunity to respond after all other testimony is provided. So I'm going to ask staff to facilitate the speakers.
So I just brought Troy in to speak. He's the applicant or the applicant's representative.
Okay, Troy.
Thank you for holding this hearing. And I don't need 20 minutes to address the issues. I think the decision was really well written and for the most part speaks for itself. But I reviewed all of the commentary that came in, and there are a couple points that I think are important to make. So first, just to kind of synthesize our argument, the subject property is designated in the Metro Plan as campus industrial. It will remain designated on the Metro Plan and the Willa Kensey Plan as campus industrial. The policy does not prescribe how allowable zoning within the campus industrial designation. And neighborhood commercial zoning is allowed in campus industrial planning designation according to the siting standards in the Metro Plan and the siting standards in the Eugene Code. And so this zoning designation does not conflict with the Metro Plan or the Willa Kensey Plan. It's an appropriate zoning for the site. Second, there was significant argument from the neighbors pushing for industrial zoning. It's a little confusing to me why the neighborhood would prefer industrial zoning over commercial zoning, but at some point we need to look at the actual property and apply the rules to how the location of the property, how it's situated, and what's around it. And I think in this situation, a community commercial zoning designation really fits the location and the surroundings much better than an industrial zoning would. In the Hawthorne Estates opposition, they write that the property should provide opportunities for diversification of the local economy through the siting of light industrial firms in a campus-like setting, And this would be for electronic manufacturing of communication components, precision testing, photographic and copying equipment, e-commerce, hospitals, laboratories, and specialized schools. Basically uses that are allowed under E1. But there's two problems with that analysis. And the first is that the property is not large enough to build an industrial campus-like setting. As was described earlier, this is a small portion. It's approximately 1.2 acres of a much larger property. And the 1.2 acres is also limited by the shape and the size and the access because of the western frontage where you saw Old Covert Road kind of come off and curve around it. And so it's not a regularly shaped piece of property where you could really build an industrial campus site. It just doesn't quite fit. In my personal opinion, an industrial or manufacturing type use here would actually impair the surrounding neighborhoods a little bit more. I will say that there was one comment in the opposition. I'm not going to say it was opposition, more of a neutral opinion, that there should be some kind of screening or landscaping or fencing to sort of offset this property from the residential. And I'm not going to agree or disagree. I think that's certainly something that should be looked at, but this isn't the appropriate place to discuss that because right now we're simply looking at zoning. And I think that's something that would make more sense to address when we have a site plan and we actually are getting to a point where we're talking about specific uses and in development. So back to the common thread here is that the siting standards for the neighborhood commercial zone set forth in the Metro Plan do not limit the district to any particular zoning designation. And I think that's probably the most important point. And the zoning is allowable under the Metro Plan and the Coburg Crescent area, the Willa Kensey area refinement plan. And it's not specifically excluded in either of those plans. There's a lot of commentary that came in about traffic, and we had a traffic study, and under the worst case scenario, I apologize, 1 second.
10 minutes.
Excuse me.
It'll probably be like an hour and a half.
I apologize. Under the worst case scenario, the estimated traffic would not degrade the performance of an existing planned transportation facility. And so traffic really isn't an issue here. There's also a question about what the population needs to be surrounding a community commercial development to support the zoning. And there's this interesting idea, and I'm not sure what it's supported by, but the idea is that you can't include all of the properties surrounding the site because there are obstacles to walking and biking traffic. Namely, you have a belt line to the south of the property, and you have Interstate 5. And one thing that I think is important to realize that hasn't been brought up anywhere is that the city of Eugene has actually extended its walking and biking paths from the end of Willa Kensey Road to the south of Beltline, under the overpass, and to the end of Chad Drive. And so even if there is a relevant argument that the property to the south of Beltline shouldn't be included in the population, I think that's resolved because there is adequate walking and biking paths that have been installed in the last 5 years that actually make that travel significantly easier. And to a lesser extent, there's also the overpass at the end of Willa Kensey Road to the Gateway Mall area. And so there's really easy walking and biking traffic that gets you from the end of Willa Kensey Road to Gateway, and Gateway can travel north to this property. So I ask that the commissioners at least acknowledge that the Beltline and I-5 are not barriers to walking and biking traffic that the appellants have suggested because of the development of these walking and biking paths. And so I actually think because the city has been developing additional walking and biking in this area, it makes sense to add community commercial to the area because they've been taking steps to develop the infrastructure to support community commercial in a way that it probably wasn't supported 5 or 10 years ago. And that concludes my remarks here. I would ask that, that after this hearing, the council give us the opportunity to keep the record open for a few days at least, just to respond to additional commentary that comes in. And that concludes my remarks.
So next I'm going to bring in Dane Butler and Teresa Bishop for the appellant.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. I am going to share my screen, and before I do so, I just want to thank the Planning Commission for considering this appeal. Following my introduction and overview of appeal issue number 1, and actually let me get my stopwatch going here. William Sherlock will be addressing appeal issues 2 and 3, followed by Dane Butler, who will do appeal issues 4 and 5. Dane is a homeowner in Hawthorne Estates and local builder. And Mike Malley, who is president of Hawthorne Estates, will address appeal issue number 6 and wrap up with a short closing. So with that, I will jump right to it. We believe the zone change from R1 to C1 is inconsistent with the Metro Plan and the Willa Kensey Area Plan. It will adversely impact local streets. And let me get my slides up here. I forgot to do that. Okay, so let's see if I can flip the page here. Whoops. No, you don't want to see my inbox. Where am I? Okay, can everyone see this okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. And also that the hearings official misinterpreted the C1 zone siting requirements. And finally, that there are unique circumstances that warrant site review. So I will go right to appeal issue number 1. It's already been reviewed by staff. The hearings official determined that the campus industrial plan designation identified on a refinement plan does not negate or in any way limit the zoning. And we dispute that. The campus industrial plan designation is not implemented by neighborhood commercial zoning. Per Eugene code, the purpose of the E1 campus employment zone is to implement the campus industrial plan designation. It's a specific and only zone that has that provision. The Metro Plan text states neighborhood commercial designations are typically not shown. And what's important are the words metropolitan scale. Given it's a regional planning document, the text explains that it just doesn't get to that fine detail. The Metro Plan diagram, however, is parcel specific for areas shown in the city on a parcel specific refinement plan. The Willa Kensey area plan diagram is a parcel specific diagram, one of the first in the city. And it designates neighborhood commercial sites. And in the record, and I encourage you to review, let's see, I have it. review our testimony that we submitted on March 24th. We provided ordinances that amended the Willa Kensey area plan to specifically designate neighborhood commercial. And a good example is on page 64 of the Willa Kensey plan. It's referred to as Inset Map D. So to make the finding that the Willa Kensey plan diagram does not designate neighborhood commercial sites is inaccurate. We provided another example where the Willa Kensey plan diagram used the general classification of commercial to cover everything from Valley River Center to Oakway to a very small lot on Cal Young Road. But if you look at the text related to that sub-area of the Willa Kensey plan, it specifically states that the lot is limited to neighborhood commercial. So in essence, that's some of the evidence that we've presented regarding the hearings official's error. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liam Sherlock, the attorney representing us in this effort. So Liam, remember to unmute yourself.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I'm on board. Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, commissioners, for your attention and consideration on this appeal. The appeal issues as laid out there's some overlap, no doubt, but there are distinguishable, and I think Teresa's laid out on the first appeal issue. Relatedly, on appeal issue number 2, we have assigned error to the hearings official's determination that the Metro Plan text relating to the neighborhood commercial takes precedence over the parcel specific campus industrial plan designation, but it doesn't, but the hearings official unfortunately did not identify any apparent conflicts between the plan text and the plan diagram. And that is kind of a crucial oversight or omission, if you will, because if you can interpret the plan and the text consistently and integrate them, then there is no conflict and there's no need to rely on policy over the map. Here, the Metro Plan says, as Teresa mentioned, you know, that it's a blob map. It doesn't give you specific parcel by parcel, but it does say if there is a refinement plan that does give specific parcel specific designations or zoning, then that is incorporated effectively into the Metro Plan, and that's what is it the case here. The Willa Kensey refinement plan does make specific identifications for each parcel. And in this case, it is clearly looked at this and said, this is a commercial, a industrial campus type of property. And the purpose of this campus industrial is to make up for a lot of the loss of that same kind of zone land back in West Eugene that, as you know, much of it, many hundreds of acres, was designated as wetland and therefore could not be developed for this purpose. And so the plan, the Metro Plan says, well, we're going to make up for that. And the area that we're going to do that in is this area here, alongside the residential use along Game Farm Road. And you know, I know there was some comment previously by the representative for the applicant that why would anybody want campus industrial here? Well, one reason is having vehicles drive in and out at all hours of the night for a Dairy Mart or a 7-Eleven, which this rezone would allow for, is very different than having a internal campus industrial that most people are home by 5 or 6, and the traffic impact is significantly less in many instances for a use compared to the rezone for commercial, neighborhood commercial. And here, the related issue number 3 is where the the hearings official erred by approving this zone change in direct conflict with the WAP policy that says the city shall allow for a gradual transition of this subject property from residential to industrial use. There is no, as we pointed out in my letter that was submitted, and I strongly urge the commissioners to review carefully, because I think we've made some cogent and winnable points if this has to go to appeal to LUBA, which we'd prefer not to have to do, but if it comes to that, we will. But that is that the language itself is pretty clear that this is the WAP, the West Eugene West
Willa Kensey.
Well, the WAP plan is because it is making specific designations, and we have pointed out where those designations are in our letter and in the appeal statement, that it does designate certain parcels for neighborhood commercial. And so therefore, because it knows how to do that, that means that, and it's a specific refinement plan, then you've got to pay attention to that, because if the WAP didn't identify any neighborhood commercial, and it was just this floating zone, well, then you probably could rely on the Metro Plan policy that says, apply it where appropriate. But here the WAP policies and the designations do identify neighborhood commercial. When we've pointed them out where in the WAP that occurs. So by having done that, if it doesn't designate a specific parcel as appropriate for neighborhood commercial, then you've got to adhere to the underlying policy for that particular zone in that designation. And here we're saying that you can't detour into a gradual transition to industrial zoning by allowing certain parcels to arbitrarily become neighborhood commercial. And I think a clean and clear and close reading of both the Metro Plan and the WAP policies and designations for this particular property, whether or not, there's lend themselves to a negative decision on this rezone. I think it's not appropriate. There is a solution for the developer or the owner of the property, however, and that is you can go and seek an amendment of the WAP, because that's the way to do it, and that's the way this application should have been handled, not through a rezone that is inconsistent with those plans and those designations. And with that, I will turn it over to Dane.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I'm just speaking mostly just on appeal issue number 4 and number 5. We believe the hearings official erred by determining the surrounding transportation system can be extended to serve uses allowed in C1, and that the zone change will not significantly affect an existing transportation facility. And the evidence we provided was, the TPRA dated November 2nd, 2020. The zone change will add 3,700 daily trips to Old Coburg Road, the west frontage. I want to be clear again, the west frontage, which is a 20-foot wide road, resulting in a total ADT of 7905. Which will then drop from an LOS-B to an LOS-E. Access to Old Coburg Road, the west frontage, is allowed outright and is preferred by the Eugene City Code. Access to Game Farm Road is prohibited without the adjustment. Traffic analysis failed to account for traffic cutting through Hawthorne Estates. If no site access on Game Farm Road is allowed, vehicles using Crescent Avenue will have a shorter distance and less travel time cutting through Hawthorne Estates. Our evidence is that delivery trucks delivering to a potential commercial parcel traveling from, say, Crescent Village or Coburg Road will cut through the existing 34-foot wide Cape Hatteras instead of looping around to the 20-foot wide curved Old Coburg Road, which is the only access currently being proposed. it's pretty much a given to us that all delivery trucks will choose a straight 34-foot wide road instead of a curved 20-foot wide road. And then appeal issue number 5 was the hearing's official misinterpreted the C1 zone citing requirements regarding convenient walking and bicycling distance in what we call the adequate support population. C1 is not a floating zone for parcel-specific refinement plans, such as the WAP. Measuring distance as a crow flies makes no sense since people do not fly. The hearing's official rationale for adequate support population would result in every 6,000 square foot lot with 49 dwellings within a 2-mile radius meeting this threshold. Using kind of the math on how that would work in most parcels, you have 5 acres, requires 4,000 people as a crow flies, equals 800 people per acre. Minimum lot size of a C1 parcel is 6,000 square feet. Convert that to acreage, equals 112 people, divided by 2.3 people per household. Pretty much that is 49 dwellings within a 2-mile radius meets the hearing's official threshold of adequate support population, which we would disagree with. It pretty much means that every parcel in the city of Eugene has adequate support population to be rezoned to C1, which we do not agree with that. That's the right interpretation.
So is Mike Malley, oh, there he is, okay.
Can you hear me? Hello, this is Mike Malley. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm Mike Malley. I'm the president of Hawthorne Estates Lot Owners Association, and I am testifying in opposition of the zone change. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Hawthorne Estates. The appeal issue I'm covering is the site review overlay. The subject property under consideration is an orphaned parcel of land that was created by the redirection of Old Coburg Road. This zone change is being considered with no end use provided. The only ingress and egress is by way of Cape Hatteras at West Old Coburg Road, the west side of the property, a small connector street, which is curved and only 20 feet wide. This street is not significant to handle traffic as only access to the property. Often residents entering Old Coburg Road to enter the subdivision have to wait for cars and or trucks and school buses to pass before proceeding. 20 feet wide, as stated by the engineering staff, they thought it was well wide enough in order for 2 cars to pass by. It's not significant to allow commercial traffic. Access to the property must include North Game Farm Road. The site review overlay must be applied as stated in William Sherlock's presentation on page 4, where he states the issue. This policy states the city shall ensure that future commercial development and redevelopments in the Willa Kensey planning area is sensitive to and compatible with existing and planned development in the surrounding area. C1 commercial is not compatible nor consistent with low density residential communities separated only by a narrow roadway. That would be Hawthorne Estates. A zone change without site review overlay would allow any buyer to submit plans for consideration of the city with no option for anyone to have a say in the design, positioning, nor type of commercial business to be placed on that property, thus allowing a business that is not consistent with or compatible with the existing development in the surrounding area R1 residential neighborhoods, Hawthorne Estates. You've received a submission from John Favel, Secretary of Northeast Neighbors Board. He very succinctly elaborated the need to extend the oversight review conditions to be imposed. We believe these steps that need to be taken to preserve the livability of Hawthorne Estates. We further believe that with the limited access proposed for this property, not 89-375 North Game Farm Road, that traffic, both cars and delivery trucks, will be directed through the streets of Hawthorne Estates. Further, the hours of operation of a convenience store as the proposed business will affect the livability of the neighborhood that abuts the property by injecting not only traffic, but noise and lighting pollution, undesirable individuals passing through the neighborhood, which bring theft and burglary. We oppose this zone change very strongly. We had 112 people, residents of our 120 lot owners, sign a petition in opposition to this zone change. They're very concerned about the safety of their children and our elderly people in this subdivision. I thank you very much for your consideration on this appeal. I would give the rest of my time to either Teresa or Liam to conclude.
I would just like to again thank the Planning Commission for your careful consideration and open eyes into the situation. Liam, did you have any? Liam, we didn't hear your comments. Are you wanting the record to be held open for written response to anything that the applicant raised tonight?
Am I unmuted? I'm sorry, just my computer's gone a little cattywampus.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, I mean, this is not, obviously keeping the record open is not required as the first evidentiary hearing's already been held. But in light of Mr. Sloanecker's request, we certainly would want a commensurate response opportunity to, well, if anybody can interject additional arguments, that'd be great. But we also obviously want a rebuttal period as well. So I would suggest a week. I think that's more realistic.
We do have some people up for public comment. I'm going to bring in John Fayville and then Troy Sloanecker.
Have I successfully unmuted myself? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is John Favo. I live at 2216 Marie Lane. I am speaking on behalf of the Northeast Neighbors Neighborhood Association. This is a unanimous position taken by the board. We're not taking a stand on the approval itself or on the particular zone designation, but we believe the hearings official made a mistake in not imposing a site review overlay. Our thinking is based on the Willa Kensey area plan, which has a policy of creating gradual transition between residential and non-residential uses, and specifically calls for the use of site overlay in order to create compatibility and buffering between the uses. I know the staff report suggests that commercial development standards obviate the need for site review overlay, but we disagree with that. We believe the standard commercial standards, development standards, assume better underlying planning than we see here. And that what we have is really the inadvertent creation of reconfiguration of the roadways. And I think Nick's map and description made that clear. It's created a situation that I'm guessing no planner would design just with a blank slate. And it's one that creates too narrow a transition between the uses and encourages the overflow of commercial traffic into the residential area. Therefore, we suggest the use of site review with specific factors in order to address this very atypical situation. First, we would limit site access. And if the county is not going to allow it to occur on North Game Farm Road, we would limit it to that section of Old Coburg Road that runs between Stonebridge Apartments and the site. This would prevent the overflow into the neighborhoods that I think they're legitimately concerned about. The second factor we would suggest is the privacy screening that was mentioned by the original attorney. And here we're uncomfortable waiting for the site plan in order to discuss screening, because as it often happens, a developer gets locked into a vision and becomes very inflexible. So let's bake it in now and protect neighbor privacy across this very inadequate space, this lack of transition between the uses. Privacy fencing and no access for commercial or pedestrians. And finally, all of us here live with the restriction of not making loud noise between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And we believe that would be a legitimate expectation of a commercial property that is so close to a residential neighborhood, and would suggest that the same hours of operation, those limited hours of operation, be applied. We don't think these impose over extensive burdens, either for the marketing or the development of the site. And I am done. Thank you for your consideration.
Next up, we will have Richard Johnson and then Jeannie Savage.
Thank you for your time. I'm an owner here in Hawthorne Estates. When I built my house, I saw the home at the other end, never anticipating that a commercial unit would be put in there. I agree also with the site plan being an afterthought, that it will probably not take place. So I think that'd be a real key thing. And the 20-foot road is a situation where just cars will stop to allow somebody else to go through. And I guarantee that people will be going down Crescent Avenue and turning into our complex or our neighborhood to access this place, if that's their entrance, is off the old western edge of Coburg Road. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Now we will have Jeannie Savage.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Savage. My husband Jim and I live in Cumberland, on Cumberland Drive in Hawthorne Estates. And I would just like to make sure that Nick Gioello, who presented the map, clarifies for the commissioners when he was showing that little spur of Old Coburg Road off of the big Coburg Road, that they understand exactly where that goes to, which is right to the mouth of Cape Hatteras, and it's only 20 feet wide. And if city staff haven't been out to look at that piece of road, they should. And if you commissioners are in our neighborhood, drive up past the register guard on Chad Drive and turn left on that little 20-foot road, and try to imagine yourselves driving a Lockme Dairy delivery truck or a Budweiser delivery truck. Would you take that little 20-foot spur, or would you come up Crescent Avenue, turn right on Cumberland, and take the 34-foot roads directly past all of our children playing in their yards and in the street? It's a tragedy waiting to happen, and it shouldn't come off of Old Coburg Road. Thank you.
That was our last hand up.
That's our last hand that's upright. Okay. So with that, we're going to have a return to, I'm sorry, Lauren Summers has her hand up. Yes, Lauren.
Commissioner Amy, I just want to make sure that the applicant doesn't want an opportunity.
Oh, no.
Okay, we're still getting there.
Well, yeah, my script says the staff will comment and we'll have questions, and the applicant will be provided an opportunity for final rebuttal.
Perfect. I just got ahead of myself. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good. So staff comment.
There we go. Unmuted. The only thing I would respond to, there was a request to show that piece of the road again. If commission wants to see that, I can put that back up on the screen. But I don't have any other comments at this time.
So back to commissioners, then this is a chance to ask some questions. Typically it's for requests for information before we get to deliberations, and keeping in mind we have another hearing this evening, and we can also circle back with questions later this evening after we get through the second hearing. But if you have sort of a brief, quick question now, just in order to keep us, so we get through the second hearing, I want to kind of keep the longer questions till later. But yes, Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Chair Amy. I just want to clarify, and I'd like Lauren to provide some guidance as to what the commission's restrictions are with regards to actually physically seeing this site as it's been suggested.
Thanks, Commissioner Edwards. Great question. So as several people have mentioned tonight, because this is a quasi-judicial application, the commission is being asked to act like a judge and is limited to the evidence that was before the hearing is official. You don't get to consider new evidence, and you don't get to consider new evidence that other folks give you, and you don't get to go find your own new evidence. So please do not take a drive out and look at the site on the ground as tempting as that might be, because that's not something that was placed before the hearing is official.
So thank you, Lauren. All right, any other quick questions from commissioners? Again, keeping in mind we should have some time after the second hearing if anybody wants to get to those. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the applicant with a chance for final rebuttal, and then we'll talk about closing the public hearing.
Hello, thanks for letting me speak again. I just want to discuss a couple points that were made. I hear a lot of concern about traffic traveling through the residential neighborhoods. And I think it's important to note that the site is located at the intersection of two main arterial roads. And while access to the site comes off of a 20-foot road, that 20-foot road is very short. It does not cut through the residential subdivision. And I don't believe that the traffic, especially large trucks, will be commuting through the residential neighborhoods in the same way that was discussed, mostly because, like I said, the site is located at the intersection of two main arterial roads, and those are the more logical routes that will be taken. The other item that I just wanted to touch on is that it was suggested that this site is supposed to make up for a shortage of industrial land that we have lost in West Eugene as a result of wetlands. And there's not a shortage of small industrial pieces of property. The discussion about the replacement of industrial lands due to federal wetlands regulations is irrelevant to this application. And in particular, the Eugene Economic Opportunities Analysis provided that Eugene has a surplus of 152 acres of industrial land on sites smaller than 10 acres. And so this is something that I think the preservation of industrial land to offset what's lost in West Eugene is for large industrial parcels and not for small industrial parcels. And those are the only two comments I have. And with that, I'll conclude.
Thank you. Thank you, Troy. Thank you to everyone who took the time to come and speak with us this evening. I believe it is now appropriate for us to close the public hearing, and I will do that. I'm closing the public hearing, and then we're going to address the issue of holding the record open. And Lauren, can you walk us through what our options are?
Certainly, Commissioner Ramey. I will look to Nick and maybe Gabe to talk about kind of time limitations on your decision on this application. But from a legal perspective, Mr. Sherlock is correct. This is not the initial public hearing, so there is no requirement that Planning Commission leave the record open. You can decide to close it tonight, or you could decide to leave it open for some period of time as requested, assuming that you have enough time then to conduct your deliberations and make your decision on the application within the required periods of time. So I'll turn it over to Nick and maybe Gabe to talk about what that looks like and what kind of flexibility you have.
Well, thank you. You know, staff's opinion is that we've got a deadline coming of June 30th, and we have deliberations set up to go over all of these issues. And so extending the record is going to put us in a position of worrying if we can get to that June 30th deadline. By allowing more the same information to come in. And I don't know if Gabe wants to weigh in on how crucial this is, but it's a deadline that was established by Planning Commission with that last extension. And so,
yeah, I just want to, thanks, Nick. I just want to clarify, actually, in this case, I think you may be referring to the deadline on the Laurel Ridge appeal as June 30th.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
If you could confirm for me, I believe that the applicants granted several extensions of time such that we have a deadline under the 120-day rule of actually July 22. So
right,
honestly, there's time, right? Part of the complicating factor, though, is that we have a pretty stacked schedule through June for deliberations on both of these appeals. We're not obligated under state law to keep the record open for additional argument at this point. And if we do, I would just remind the commission that we need to afford the parties the opportunity, like we do at an initial evidentiary hearing, such that we typically have 1 week for new argument for any party. Then we'd have an opportunity for responsive argument, and then the applicant would get final rebuttal. So we're talking about a total of 3 weeks that we would need to delay the first deliberations for. I don't have a calendar right in front of me, but that could result in a bit of a pinch on time, and we would have to work through rescheduling and polling the commission for a variety of new dates to meet that deadline. So I'll leave it at that.
Gabe, just to clarify, is the week the smallest amount we could leave the? It was requested 2 or 3 days. Is that?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that I think that we could do something less. We're not obligated under the statute to do it precisely with the typical 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. We could do something customized and shorter. But I think that in any event, we'd be pushing off the first deliberations beyond that Monday.
Right. So no matter there's no circumstance under which the 24th would still be held as a date. Okay.
That's right.
Commissioner Edwards.
Thanks, Chair Ramey. I'm just confused. If we are not allowed to accept any new evidence, why would we be keeping the record open? Is there a reason?
Commissioner Edwards, is a good question. You're right. There's no opportunity to submit new evidence. Folks could still submit argument to you about the appeal issues identified and based on the evidence that's already in the record. So what I believe they're asking for is an opportunity to submit additional argument.
Okay, thank you.
That's my interpretation as well. So as a commission, we need to make a positive decision here, either to hold the record open or to close the record this evening. Does anyone care to speak in favor of holding the record open, or any thoughts about that? Commissioner Taylor?
The applicant has requested that there be some time and opportunity to respond and provide argument. And it doesn't sound like from staff's perspective that there is an urgency to meet that. So what I'm thinking is allow for the extension. Thank you.
I would say that would be my inclination if the applicant is asking for extended time. They're chasing their own schedule. So for us, it's a challenge of finding the time to meet for deliberations. Okay, so how about a motion one way or the other? I believe the choices in front of us are the standard 7 + 7 + 7 or close the record this evening.
I'm going to move that we close the record this evening.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Sorry, I didn't hear the motion. Sorry, she clipped out.
Sorry, Commissioner Taylor. I moved that we close the record this evening.
And I believe that was seconded by Commissioner Basin.
Yes.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Further discussion on this? Commissioner Taylor.
I just want to note that these processes, there's a lot of time and money by both parties, and because there was items submitted to into the record tonight or today, I think that allowing an applicant to have that time to respond is very reasonable. So I am not going to vote in favor.
Commissioner Basin.
Can we clarify, or I'm a little confused about how long we would keep it open. I think what I heard initially is maybe 3 weeks, and then I heard maybe fractions of weeks. And can we just be really clear what it is we're talking about in terms of time?
Yes, he said, looking at either Gabe or Lauren.
Right.
Well, in a situation like this, obviously we're dealing with a motion to close the record tonight, but we, I think the way that Chair Ramey presented it, we would look at a typical 3-week period. However, it's within the commission's discretion to decide on a different schedule. And, I'm a little hesitant to propose that on behalf of the party, but if we're talking about a few days for the applicant to respond, I would want, or given their request and Mr. Sherlock's request to rebut that, I would think we're still in a situation where then the applicant gets the final word. So we're still in a situation where we need 3 different open record periods. We could shorten that and make it, say, by end of day Friday, and then the following Wednesday for rebuttal, and then perhaps Friday of next week for the applicant's final rebuttal. That's just a guess, trying to compress the time frame and keep your schedule kind of on track. Does that help, Commissioner Basin?
Yes.
Yes, Nick.
Maybe we should ask the applicant if he still wants the record open, because I think he received all the stuff and
his hand is
raised. Maybe he was anticipating hearing things tonight that I think it's worth asking.
Commissioner Fragala, I'm going to let the applicant weigh in here.
Thanks for letting me weigh in. I don't think we need to leave the record open. What I was anticipating is that there would be evidence presented that was different than what was presented the first time around, and that I wanted time more than anything to maybe strike things from the record, because the appellants have suggested that they're intending to appeal this, and so I wanted an opportunity to explain what evidence has been presented in tonight's hearing that shouldn't be preserved for appeal. That didn't really happen too much, and I don't think there's a reason to keep the record open on those grounds. So if you want to close the record, I would fully support that.
Terrific. So given that, and okay with Commissioner Fragola, I'm going to call for the vote. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So all those in favor, the motion is to close the record. All those in favor, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-0. Thank you, commissioners. So I believe we have finished our work for the first hearing, and we're ready to begin on the second hearing. There's a little bit of text here. Deliberations are scheduled to begin next Monday, May 24th from 11:30 to 1:30. And if we do not reach a decision that day, additional meetings are scheduled in June to accommodate additional deliberation and possible action. You can watch the deliberations by visiting Eugene Planning Commission website, where a live broadcast will stream. You can also watch deliberations using the meeting materials and webcast link from the main City of Eugene website. If you have questions about viewing the deliberations, please reach out to Nick Gaiello. Now we're going to move on to the second hearing. The second hearing of the evening is an appeal on the hearings official's decision approving the Laurel Ridge planned unit development. At the beginning of our meeting, I covered general information about our hearing process, but there are certain items we need to repeat as they are procedurally required. So please bear with me while I go through this process for our second hearing of the night. Before we begin our hearing for the Laurel Ridge PUD, the city code requires that planning commissioners disclose any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, biases, or abstentions. Do any commissioners have anything to disclose? Have staff received any challenges to a commissioner's impartiality submitted pursuant to Eugene Code Section 9.7065 parentheses 5 on parentheses?
We have not.
We have not. Okay. With that taken care of, I'll remind everyone that since these are appeal hearings, there are unique procedures which we are legally required to follow. The decision of the Planning Commission on the appeal is considered quasi-judicial and will follow that format. I want to remind everyone that your testimony must be directed toward the issues identified in the appeal statement and the applicable approval criteria from the Eugene Code. No new evidence can be accepted by the Planning Commission, and any arguments you make should be related to evidence that is already on the record. So you should be testifying about 1, the materials and information already presented to the hearings official in the first public hearing process, and 2, whether or not you think the hearings official made a mistake based on the approval criteria for the planned unit development. I also want to remind everyone again that the failure to raise an issue with enough specificity to allow the Planning Commission and other parties to respond will preclude future appeals on that issue. Those wishing to speak during the Laurel Ridge PUD appeal hearing will be asked to virtually raise your hand. As with the first hearing, the applicant and the appellants have each arranged for up to 20 minutes total for their presentations. And I will also ask that individuals other than the applicant or the appellant limit their testimony to 3 minutes to allow everyone a chance to speak this evening. There are different ways to raise your hand depending on how you are participating. For those joining us on a computer, tablet, or other smart device, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or by opening the participant window. For those joining by phone, please dial *9, after which you should hear audio confirmation of your hand being raised. If you wish to speak during this appeal hearing for the Laurel Ridge PUD and you have not already raised your virtual hand, please raise your virtual hand now. The Planning Commission's decision will be the final city decision on this matter. If there are any further appeals after our decision, they will go to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. We will now begin with a brief presentation from staff. Nick, is here, and he's going to provide us with an overview of the appeal and the application at hand. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Commissioner Raymond. Bear with me while I share the screen and apologize for confusing the time frame of this appeal and application with the previous one. There's been a lot of information to go over these last few days. And this is, here we go, appeal of the Laurel Ridge PUD, and it also has a standards review, traffic impact analysis, and adjustment review that are all combined as one big application. Just for some context for everybody in here, but I'm sure everybody knows where this property is. You can see it located here in the Vicinity Map, just off of 30th Avenue, where Spring Boulevard crosses the overpass. If I put my laser pointer on, this is the property here highlighted in the teal color, the red dot in the middle. For context, Hendricks Park. This is the Glenwood interchange that's referred to in the appeal. And East Ridge, then East Mountain, and now you'll probably hear it referred to as East Highlands Estates. But we typically call it East Ridge for the time being, as it comes down through here. And this is the development that actually has some roads that could potentially connect into this Laurel Ridge development, as we'll talk about a little bit. This is a zoning map that was used during our presentation with the hearings official, and you can see the property outlined in red. The green area through here is the Parks Recreation Open Space portion of this site that is zoned as such. The rest of the site is zoned R1 with the PUD overlay and the water resources overlay for the Goal 5 resources on the property. Similar zoning around this property, East Ridge having the same zoning. You have other developed single family areas here and here. You have some agricultural lands here. You have some current developments that are going in right here, a subdivision. And then this area here outside of the city limits. For context, it's been a long, circuitous process to get to the version of the site plan you're looking at right now. I guess it's worth mentioning that this process started in 2018 with an application, and actually going through that process, it becomes apparent that there were initial attempts prior to that for many years to do something with this property. Nonetheless, we're here today. And basically what happened is the applicant came in, I think it was with 132 single family homes at that time in 2018, that basically put single family homes on this entire site and had more roadways through it, more crossings across the Goal 5 area, 2 connections to the East Ridge development. And during that, we went through a hearings official hearing and then an appeal to Planning Commission. And at that point, the applicant invoked a statute in the ORS that basically allowed the applicant to take pretty much an indefinite timeout that we all agreed to a new time frame and bypassed the typical 120 days to a final decision, and allowed the applicant to come in and amend the application. And that's how we got to today, basically. So we're now looking at the amended application. I think that's clear for everybody. And you can see the number of units that are proposed. Multifamily units are here. And about 2/3 of this 98-acre site are preserved as what the applicant refers to as a forest management area, with 2 single-family home sites within that area, 1 connection to the East Ridge development, to what is referred to as Brackenfern Lane in their development, basically a connection. Well, I'm not even going to say that anymore because that has gone away too. But basically, you have your access point coming in off of frontage road here by 30th Avenue, and a frontage road that comes down and provides an emergency access only. And basically, it's 1 road into the site, number of private drive aisles, and multifamily units here. This is just a close-up of that area, and the parking areas are highlighted in red, where there's both on-street and then there's parking under some of these buildings in this area, just to give everybody a little context. And this is a view of the other side of the site where the 2 single-family homes are proposed that would act as forest management homes for whoever would be managing these areas or taking care of them. And so this appeal got basically 2 issues. And in our agenda item summary that we provide, we didn't have the ability to view the appeal before we had to schedule this hearing. We only had a day or 2. And so we chose not to write about what we hadn't had a chance to really look at and digest. We're going to provide that to you prior to the next deliberation meeting. So we'll be working on that in the next few days. And basically we'll go through the 2 appeal issues and then do a summary of the appeal issues, do a summary of the hearing's official decision, and then make our recommendations. But nonetheless, these are the 2 appeal issues. And basically they're around the criteria in the PUD criteria at 8320. Number 2, the first one is the PUD is consistent with the applicable refinement plan policies, and the 2 refinement plan policies are 2 refinement plans that are applicable to the site of the Laurel Hill plan and the South Hill study. And the hearings of the first appeal issue is that the hearings official misconstrued the Laurel Hill plan, refinement plan, which includes the East Laurel Hill development node plan and the South Hill study refinement plan, by allowing a connection to 30th Avenue. And what this is really about is the connection from the Glenwood connector or the Glenwood interchange through the East Ridge development and into this site, and then on to 30th Avenue. And the appeal is about that connection. And the second appeal issue is the hearings official misconstrued policies, co-provisions, and other plans related to linkage to the park sites and the Ridgeline Trail system. And what that issue is about is in the hearings official, in the staff report that was given to the hearings official, we recommended a trail connection in that forest management area to the property to the south that the city had recently acquired, and a trail connection that would provide a connection to the Ridgeline Trail system. After, in the time from the staff report that was issued and prior to the hearings official making a decision, the applicant, through their attorney, issued or filed a letter and put into the testimony and challenged that requirement for a trail at the applicant's expense, raised a number of issues, and upon staff's review of those issues and the court cases that were cited, staff reversed its opinion and determined that the trail connection that we had proposed was no longer valid. And so we removed that and the several proposed conditions, and the hearings official upheld that recommendation from staff and did not require a trail connection. And that's the second appeal issue. So with that, I'll end my presentation and turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open the public hearing of the Eugene Planning Commission for the appeal of the hearings official's decision approving the Laurel Ridge PUD. As a reminder, to raise your hand, please click on the hand icon. If you are joining by phone, please dial *9. Be sure you give us your name and address before beginning your testimony and let us know if you are in favor, neutral, or opposed to the PUD approval. As a reminder, testimony is limited to 3 minutes for all parties other than the applicant and the appellant. To help keep time, we will have Commissioner Basin raise his hand when your time has ended. The applicant will speak first, and then we will hear testimony from the appellants and then from others. The applicant will also be given a final opportunity to respond after all other testimony is provided. Okay, so let's get started.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Rick Satry with the Satry Group. There'll be two of us this evening speaking on behalf of the applicant. I'll go first, followed by my colleague, Bill Close. For the record, my office is at 375 West 4th Avenue in the Whitaker neighborhood of Eugene. In advance, I want to thank you for your time and your consideration of the applications and the appeal issues before you this evening. These applications have been approved by, I'm going to try and be a broadcast journalist and read and maintain eye contact at the same time, which I'm sure I'll fail to do. So I'm going to read here for a minute. These applications have been approved by the Eugene hearings official. As staff shared with you, there are 4 of them that were bundled together and processed concurrently. They are standalone applications. They receive standalone decisions, but then they were processed and bundled all into one HO decision, and they're all bundled into an appeal before you this evening. We're here because this approval has been appealed by the Laurel Valley citizens. As staff said a minute ago, they've raised 2 issues. And as staff and Commissioner Ramey have also said, that this is an on-the-record appeal. No new evidence may be presented. If it is, you are not allowed to consider it. I'm keeping my remarks brief this evening, and I'll say that staff recommended and the hearings official approved all 4 of the applications. Both staff and the HO found that the applications, as conditioned, satisfied the applicable criteria. I will say that there are 40, I've got the staff report open on the other monitor here, there are 40 conditions of approval between all 4 applications. And it's important to note that the applicant has accepted all 4 of those conditions of approval. This has been a long process. We've been through a lot. We've listened to the neighbors. We've listened to staff. We've listened to other consultants. And we believe that this latest proposal before you, because it did receive staff recommendation and it was approved by the hearings official, does stand as decided because it has been found by the hearings official to meet all of the applicable criteria. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Bill Close. But as he does that, we want you to know that Bill and I are both here to answer any questions that you might have this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Can you all hear me? Good. Rick said that this has been a long process. It's also been a grueling process. I'm trying to remember which commissioner during the deliberations on for site plan 2.0, which took place last December, which commissioner opined that it just should not be so difficult to get approval to develop housing in Eugene as this, to which I couldn't concur at the time because the record was closed, but now I can say, bravo, right on, it shouldn't be so difficult. And all that's saying it so long ago that I don't remember which commissioner made that comment. Lots happened in the last year and 4 months for example, we've all probably been vaccinated. We're on site plan. Well, initially, I want to say that I provided to the staff Sunday night a detailed letter responding point by point to the issues that have been raised on appeal. At this point, I really don't know whether you folks, individual commissioners, have gotten a copy of that letter. Gabe's nodding his head. Yes. Okay, good. I just haven't been able to confirm that to this point. That's good. So then hitting just a couple of high points. We made two commitments to the commission when we gave the commission a year ago December a proposed conceptual site plan for 3.0. And that was first to base that conceptual makeover on the issues that were most problematic for the hearings official and the staff on site plan 2.0. And those issues were too much asphalt, not enough trees, too much cut and fill, too much stormwater, and problematic geotechnical areas because of all the work that was being done on these slopes. So our conceptual plan tried to minimize those four externalities. And what we came up with was a conceptual plan we gave you a year ago in December, which was shove all the housing to the west and preserve the forest on the east. So over the last year and several months, we've put flesh on those bones. And that's what you have in front of you now, which the staff supported. The second thing we committed to the commission a year ago in December was that we weren't going to come back to you without support and approval by staff. And we managed to do that. So here we are. We're really proposing development on about 30 acres and forest preservation on about 60 acres. We're actually going a little beyond forest preservation because the professional forester we consulted said to us, you got to do more than preserve because this forest is completely hammered and has been over the last 60 years. So he put together a forest management plan, which went through a number of iterations working with staff, and everybody at the city now seems to be happy with it. So that is an integral part of our proposal. We're basically going to preserve, not just preserve, but also restore and manage the forest area. There are two appeal issues here. The first relates to the connection from East 30th to Brackenford by a local street. This issue relates to the meaning of a refinement plan policy. And the neighbors argue it's an ambiguous policy. It is ambiguous, unquestionably, which means it needs to be interpreted. The neighbors argue that the policy prohibits any kind of connection by street from the Brackenford Fern Collector through to 30th Avenue. Our reading and the staff's reading and the hearings officials' reading is that what's prohibited by the plan policy is connection by a collector. That is, Brackenfern's a collector that starts down there in the bottom of Glenwood and comes up the hill. And the policy intends not to continue that collector through to 30th Avenue, which would mean continuing it through this project. It's not continuing through this project. This project proposes a local street. So that's the difference, the conflict in how the neighbors versus the applicant, the city and the hearings official interpret that policy. And that argument's pretty plainly stated in the neighbors' appeal. The key point in my letter responding to that appeal issue is that the neighbors have not challenged the an interpretation by the hearings official, which says even if the neighbor's interpretation of that policy in the refinement plan is correct, that doesn't mean there can't be a connection by a local street through to 30th Avenue. And the reason is that this policy statement in the refinement plan is not an independent mandatory standard for approval. The definition of policy in this refinement plan is identical to the definition of policy in the Willa Kensey area plan. And that definition has been the subject of litigation at the city and at LUBA. And what LUBA has said is that the definition of policy in this refinement plan does not state an independent mandatory standard for approval. It's more in the nature of a consideration. You got to consider it. And once you consider it, you can weigh it with other things in the plans and the code. And in this instance, the hearings official said, it's just a consideration. Even if it means what the neighbors say it means, no connection whatsoever, it's still just a consideration. And we look to other language in the plans and in the code, all of which relate to connectivity and the importance of connectivity. And the conclusion is that the connection by local street can be made. Now, the point in my letter is that the neighbors did not challenge that finding by the hearings official. And therefore, this whole statement of their first appeal issue is not a basis for the Planning Commission to change the merits of the hearings official's decision. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is a little bit more of a hairball. There is a lot of stuff in the pages developing the second assignment of error. They all relate to the need for connectivity with some kind of pedestrian path to the city property adjacent to, through the, from the interior of this project to the south, up the hill to the city property adjacent to the south of this site. What you have to appreciate here is that within the last few months, this is a very, very long site from east to west. And in the last few months, the city has actually purchased all of the private property south, adjacent to the south property line of this site. That's a lot of ground. And the city now owns all the property on the east and the west, all of the property on the south, and a little bit of property up on the northeast. The city's acquiring property in this neighborhood like a Pac-Man on steroids. And that's all fine, that's what it is. But the neighbors are proceeding on the assumption that all of that property is city parkland and that it's going to have a Ridgeline Park on it. And therefore, there needs to be a pedestrian path connection to from the interior of our project up the hill, hundreds of feet, to the south property line. They're actually requesting a path that meets the city standards for a pedestrian pathway, which would make it 10 or 12 feet of asphalt lights. And it's got to have a certain grade, which means that it would be switchbacking up the hill through the middle of the forest that we're trying to preserve and manage and restore. And our professional foresters just, no good. Well, common sense says, no good. So initially the city wanted that dedication and path developed. And on further reflection, the city staff and the hearings official concluded that the city could not, consistent with constitutional limitations, demand the dedication and improvement of that path. We're in concurrence with that. The neighbors also invoked South Hill Study language that requires consideration of providing connections, pathways to the Ridgeline Park. And getting back to my first point, there is no Ridgeline Park on the city property, newly acquired city property to the adjacent to the south of this site. The property isn't even, it's not dedicated for parks, and there's no Ridgeline Trail, and the important thing is there's no acknowledged city plan, which states the ultimate policy choice that either this will be parkland or that there will be a Ridgeline Trail on it. There's no shortage of park planning documents that show this area being parked, showing trails in it and so on. But none of those plans, those park policy plans, is an adopted element of the Metro Plan. The city, for whatever reasons, has decided to make all of its park planning documents exceedingly fuzzy and not binding parts of the Metro Plan. So that's the big picture on the second. I mean, there's a lot more there in my letter from last Sunday night, but that's the big picture. We're in complete concurrence with the staff on this proposal. We ask you to affirm this. We're at site plan 3.0, going on 10 years of city processing of this. I've got to count in my letter the number of times that we've been before the hearings official and the planning commission and LUBA and the Court of Appeals, just trying to get something in the way of housing approved on this property. We have to have a plan unit development. Plan unit developments, if you're blessed with a plan unit development overlay, you have to go through 4 steps before you can even start moving dirt. And we're still at step 1. So I'm looking forward to having this done while I'm still practicing law. Thank you very much.
So next I'm going to bring in Sean Malone and Paul Oram.
Commissioner Ramey, may I interject quickly, please?
Yes, please.
I do need to leave at 7:30 this evening. And so I will watch the remainder of the recording. Lauren, do you have any other direction to provide me?
Thank you, Commissioner Fragola. When you come back for deliberations on this application, we'll just ask you to confirm that you have in fact watched the portion of the recording that you were not present for.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Sean Malone on behalf of Laurel Hill Valley Citizens, 259 East 5th Avenue, Suite 200C, 97401. Thank you for holding this hearing and for your consideration of this appeal. I'm going to be speaking first on the first appeal issue. Paul Oram will be speaking to the second issue, and then Tim Bradshaw will summarize if he can be pulled up as well. In response to some initial comments by Mr. Close, just before this hearing, I received Mr. Close's submittal, and we would dispute that our argument is not geared towards this not being approval criteria. The argument itself for the first issue contends that the hearings official misconstrued applicable law by finding that the no connection to 30th Avenue shall be made language was misinterpreted. And part and parcel of that is that it is an approval criterion for this application. As I said, the first issue is whether the hearings official correctly interpreted the 1982 refinement plan policy that provides that no connection to 30th Avenue shall be made. The hearings official interpreted that phrase to refer to the Glenwood collector. Now, our reviewing body is going to look at the text, the context, and legislative history, and that's what I'll address here today. So I'll begin with the text of the policy, which states, the Glenwood collector shall be designed to avoid breaking up large and existing properties, improve the intersection alignment of the Laurel Hill Glenwood overpass, and maintain safe sight distance. It shall serve as the primary access to future residential development south of the node, but terminate and diffuse into the road, other roads serving the area. No connection to 30th Avenue shall be made. As noted, the basic error that the hearings official reads is that the hearings official reads the last sentence to refer to the Glenwood collector. The hearings official's interpretation reads a redundancy into the policy. Statute provides that where there are several provisions or particulars, such construction is, if possible, to be adopted as will give effect to all. In other words, the rules of the statutory construction, also applicable to local land use regulations, look to every component of the provision to have meaning. Similarly, case law states that well-worn principles of statutory construction counsel us to avoid, if possible, interpretations that render portions of a statute redundant. The second sentence of the policy begins with the word it. I think everyone appears to agree that it refers to the Glenwood collector. The second sentence states, it shall serve as the primary access to future residential development south of the node, but terminate and diffuse into the other roads serving the area. At that point, we know what the Glenwood Collector is to do. It's supposed to terminate, and then it will diffuse into other roads. So there is no more Glenwood Collector to be concerned about because it terminates. The hearings official's reading of the policy that attributes the next sentence to the Glenwood Collector would be redundant because that policy has already stated that the Glenwood Collector has to terminate. The final sentence, no connection to 30th Avenue shall be made, refers to the immediately preceding subject, the other roads that diffuse from the Glenwood Collector. Under the hearings official's interpretation, the final sentence is redundant and superfluous. Under appellant's interpretation, each provision of this policy is given meaning. Now, looking to the context of the provision, if there's any confusion about what was provided previously, then the map or diagram provided in the plan unequivocally resolves any ambiguity. I've included this diagram at Exhibit D, page 5 of the appellant's appeal packet, and that's a diagram that shows the Glenwood Collector and then shows two streets diffusing from the terminated Glenwood Collector. And next to the diffused streets, the diagram states no connection to 30th Avenue. So the Glenwood the phrase no connection to 30th Avenue is immediately next to these diffused streets. And that's exactly what the plain reading of the text indicates as well. It's referring to the immediately preceding subject, which is the diffused streets. Next, the reviewing body will look to legislative history. The hearings official ignored legislative history proffered by those that were party to creating the policy. I'll quote from the testimony of Jan Wassman, which states, it has always been the intent of the Laurel Hill Valley citizens to avoid the valley becoming a shortcut for people wishing to travel between Franklin Boulevard, which lies to the north of our neighborhood, and 30th Avenue, which lies to the south. And while that goal is clearly stated in the original Laurel Hill plan, the policies that implemented that goal contained some loopholes. We were determined that the 1982 update to our plan would correct that shortcoming. As a consequence, the transportation policy that was included in the 1982 update makes it totally clear that there should be no connection to 30th Avenue whatsoever. It is stated in the policy itself as a simple declarative sentence, no connection to 30th Avenue shall be made. And again, on the map of the East Laurel Hill node, no connection to 30th Avenue. So that's the text, context, and legislative history. Under the hearings official's interpretation, we result in redundancies. The hearings officials ignored legislative history, and the hearings official also ignored clear context, which is the diagram that also states no connection to 30th Avenue. Next, the hearings official justifies the interpretation based on the street connectivity standard in the fire marshal's comments. First, we're here in a land use hearing. The fire marshal's comments are not land use regulations, so they do not apply here. Second, the street connectivity issues are essentially later enacted provisions, and the courts in LUBA have found that later enacted statutes are not context for what the legislator intended an earlier adopted statute to mean. In other words, you cannot use the street connectivity issue to interpret the meaning of the earlier enacted policy. Next, the hearings official never identified how the appellant's interpretation is inconsistent with the street connectivity standards. And finally, those street connectivity standards specifically allow for exceptions in this process, whereas an amendment to the refinement plan would have to be a completely separate process. As noted in the appeal packet, the city here has found itself up against an unanticipated problem with the plain language and context and legislative history of the policy. Importantly, the hearings official cannot legislate through interpretation because of the unanticipated problems. But that is exactly what the hearings official has done here. There's a process to amend the refinement plan, and that type of legislative amendment must be made instead of legislating through interpretation. And with that, we think the hearings official clearly misconstrued the policy that's a mandatory approval criterion. And as such, we believe that the hearings official's decision should be reversed on that basis, and we'll turn it over to Paul Oram to address the second issue.
This is Paul Oram speaking. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm not sure why I can't see myself or you. I want to make sure that you have ample opportunity to ask questions of Sean Malone before I ask anything. All right, assuming that you will have opportunities to ask questions of Sean, I'll very briefly cover the Parks and Trails issue. My name is Paul Oram. I own property at 2389 Laurel Hill Drive in Laurel Hill Valley. Laurel Hill Valley Citizens has consistently focused on just a few issues, one of which is parks and trails. I want to remind you to sit back, look at the ceiling, and take in what is the big vision for parks and trails and the Ridgeline system. It's for a connected trail system all the way from Fern Ridge to Mount Pisgah. This vision is expressed in the adopted Eugene 2035 Transportation System Plan, Eugene Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan, Eugene Trails Plan, the South Hill Study, the Laurel Hill Plan, including in some of these specific intended trail segments and routes. While the Laurel Ridge Plan explains how a person would walk to the Ribbon Trail to the west, it does not address pedestrian access to the Black Oak Basin Park, newly added park area to the southeast. The city proposed a trail to Black Oak Basin as a condition of approval, but then withdrew it. Unlike what Bill Clues just told you, it was to have been a soft surface footpath, not paved, and no lights. Soft surface trail. The city has clear authority to require dedication of public access ways, for example, at EC 96805 and elsewhere, but decided it could not meet the takings criteria. However, the hearings official erred in not considering options that have no cost or extremely minimal cost to the developer, such as a city-built and maintained trail, and in not being aware of or referencing the trail plans I just cited above. The Planning Commission should not approve this development without requiring, as a condition of approval, trail access from the site to the Black Oak Basin Park area. In the interest of time, I'll yield back any time that we have left to others from Laurel Hill Valley citizens.
And so I think Paul, Tim Bradshaw was going to present as the third person. I don't know if he can be brought up.
Thank you. My name is Tim Bradshaw. I live at 2663 Moon Mountain Drive. I don't know why I can't see myself. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
2663 Moon Mountain Drive. I've lived here since 1980. I'm just going to briefly summarize. I think Sean hit most of the high points of what I was going to say. It's obvious, as we've argued in our appeal narrative, and again tonight, that the hearings official and the city staff has misinterpreted language, conflated two separate policies, mischaracterized the Laurel Hill Valley arguments, and added language that's not contained in the actual plan provisions, and reaching their conclusion that the proposed PUD meets the requirements of the Laurel Hill Plan. At issue are the two transportation policies, the 1974 and 1982 revision. I'd also like to point out that in addition to mischaracterizing the LHVC arguments, she's mischaracterized the applicant's position as well. She states that essentially, quote, the city and the applicant interpret the term no connection to 30th Avenue shall be made to mean that no connection from the Glenwood collector to 30th Avenue shall be made. The LHVC and other neighbors interpret that sentence to mean no connection between the Glenwood collector and 30th Avenue shall be made. However, the applicant's representative, Bill Cluse, in a letter dated April 2nd, 2021, states that the only reason they put in the connection was that city staff said that it must be included and that road connectivity is not needed to make their plan work. It's an added expense. It'll cause them problems with the forest management. It increases their externalities and trespass issues. So it's not correct to say the city staff and the applicant want the connection. It's the city staff that wants the connection. And as mentioned earlier, it's clear that the hearings official and the city staff have run into unanticipated problems with the plain language and context of the policies. The available alternative is to amend the plan through legislation, not attempt to legislate through interpretation. In summary, it's clear that the explicit language and legislative history that the Laurel Hill Plan prohibits any connection between 30th Avenue and the I-5 interchange. The PUD applicant doesn't need the connection. The neighborhood opposes it. The city staff is the only party lobbying for road connection, but can't come up with a persuasive argument in favor of it, as will be seen if you carefully read our appeal narrative. They use tortured logic to make their case. This should be simple for the commission to rule against the hearings official. All you have to do is carefully review 3 short paragraphs and a map. The language is clear, the intent is clear, no connection between 30th and the I-5 interchange. I urge you to carefully read the LHVC appeal narrative. Your choices are to deny the application as it doesn't meet the criteria of the Laurel Hill Plan. You can approve the application with a condition that does not result in a connection to 30th Avenue, or you can begin the process of amending the clear existing language of the current statute. Rubber stamping the city staff and the hearings officials' flawed logic should not be one of your choices. Thank you for your time.
I think that wraps up appellant's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for all of you coming. Now we can open it up to others who are opposed, neutral, or in favor of this action. If there are any others who wish to speak, raise your hands now.
We don't have any other hands up at this time.
Okay. Staff comments. Staff comments is next.
We have no comments. Thank you.
No comments. Okay. Commissioner questions. Okay. Terrific. So with that, the applicant is provided an opportunity for final rebuttal. Okay, Bill, I think you're muted there.
Okay, how's that? Better?
Much better.
Good, good. I just have 3 points to make. The first, I apologize if it comes up across as a little repetitive, but it is the critical point for the first allegation of error regarding that policy and the refinement plan that says no connection to 30th Avenue. The hearings official at one point in her decision posited the possibility that the citizens' interpretation of that policy was correct, that no connection will be made, not by collector street and not by a local street. She then explained why the result would be the same. And the reason she gave is because the nature of a policy in that refinement plan is not an independent mandatory standard for a decision. It is, the nature is as a consideration. And a consideration just needs to be considered in light of all of the other relevant standards. And what she said was, we have other policies in the Metro Plan and the code that relate to and require connectivity. Those are mandatory independent standards. And so a consideration gives way to mandatory standards. And therefore, it's okay to have a local street making the connection. And the point of my letter responding to the appeal is that that finding and that legal reasoning by the hearings official wasn't really challenged in the neighbor's appeal. They focused on the meaning of the policy. And the hearings official says, even if you're right about the meaning, it's still okay to have a local street connection. That's point one. Point two goes to Mr. Orum's comment about Black Oak Basin Park. I'm not sure there is a Black Oak Basin, I guess. That's just a location on the newly acquired city land adjacent to the south of this site. I question whether it's a park. The neighbors may think it's a park because they cross our property to get to it. But I don't believe that it's designated in any acknowledged city comprehensive plan as being a city park. I don't know how it could be because the city just took ownership to it in the last few months. Mr. Orum also suggested that the applicant could be required to dedicate bare land for some kind of a connection or trail that the city would develop at its own cost. And that certainly would be constitutionally okay. No, it wouldn't. The point is that even requiring dedication of the land for a trail that the city might develop, that's still an exaction. You can exact land without asphalt being put on it by the applicant or with asphalt being put on it by the applicant. It's still an exaction because you're requiring a dedication of a property right. And any dedication of a public pedestrian path is not going to pass constitutional muster because the applicant's development is not creating or contributing to the need for that path. Every person that is going to reside in this project and create externalities on the world is going to have a direct path to all the property along the south of this development site, including any ridgeline trail that might be developed, because every person that resides in this project, hundreds and hundreds of them, is going to have access on the public street and also on this 8-foot wide glorified sidewalk, which is going to run through the entirety of the site. It's going to take anybody in this project directly to whatever ridgeline trail or whatever park is to the south. So this project is not creating the need for the dedication that's being required or requested by the neighbors at this second location. It may be a fine idea to have another connection, another path. Our point is that the city, if the city believes that that's the right thing to do, if that's something that's worth having, the city can go buy the ground or condemn it or whatever, but they can't require it by demanding a dedication and connection with this approval. That's the nature of the constitutional rules, with which I think the city staff and city attorney and hearings official all agree. That pretty much wraps it up. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. You're good, Rick? Okay. So with that, I believe I will close the public hearing at this time. And we did not receive a request to open the record or keep the record open. So I believe it would also be appropriate to close the record at this time, which I don't know, Lauren, do we need to vote on that?
Commissioner Ramey, I would say unless you are seeing any objections from other planning commissioners, you could go ahead and close the record.
Okay. Seeing none, I will close the record. So I've closed the public hearing and I've closed the record. Deliberations on this appeal are also scheduled to begin on Monday, May 24th from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. And if we do not reach a conclusion that day, additional meetings are scheduled throughout June to accommodate additional deliberations and possible action. You can watch deliberations by visiting the Eugene Planning Commission website, where a live broadcast will stream. You can also watch deliberations using the meeting materials and webcast link from the main City of Eugene websites. If you have questions about viewing the deliberations, please reach out to Nick Giello. At this time, I'd like to offer an opportunity to commissioners to ask any further questions they might have had or request follow-up information from staff ahead of deliberations for either appeal item. I know we tried to budget ourselves earlier, but if you've had any follow-up questions to staff, go ahead and make those requests now. Yes, Commissioner Taylor.
Oh, sorry, too many. I'm hitting my fingers, too sensitive. I'm here. Okay. So, excuse me. I do want to first let the Planning Commission know that I am going on vacation. So I will not be here on May 24th. I'm actually not going to be here on June 7th either. And we are actually going to be in a car for weeks. And connectivity will be, and we're going to be camping. So my ability even to potentially show up on the 8th, if I have the ability to get rid of a conflict, might be a challenge. So I might not participate in deliberations. I will do my best to be there on the 8th if they do continue to the 8th. But I just wanted you to know that. I do have a question because what I wanted clarification from staff is that in looking through materials, it seems like page 18th in, sorry, this has to do with the first item on the agenda, first project. On page 18 in the Willa Kensey area plan, it does state that the plans that are within the refinement plan are not zoning maps. So I just want clarification because the appellant had indicated that there is C1 zoning allocated within the Willa Kensey area plan. So I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you. The other one is to follow up on the question of Black Oak Basin. Is that a park? Is that an identified park? So that would be good clarification. It seems like there was question about that considering the property was just purchased. Thank you.
I had just a question about Bill Close's 21-page letter. Is that in our packet?
With 21
he said it was 21. I hope it wasn't 21 pages. Maybe it was 2.1 pages.
And that was Mr. Close's?
From Bill Close that he said he sent Sunday night.
Yeah, there were two letters that were included in what I sent today.
Commissioner Rainey, it's on page 13 of the packet. Laurel's testimony from today is at least one of the.
Never mind. Okay, got it. I got it. I'm looking at the original agenda packet, not the testimony. Got it. Okay, got it. Thank you, Commissioner Isaacson. So any other questions, comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I am going to, also seeing no frantic gestures from Alyssa or any other members of the staff, I'm going to, oh, she does have something. Okay, Alyssa, yes.
It has nothing to do with with either deliberations. It's more having to do with meetings next week. So if you want to finish wrapping this up, I can.
No, I did.
You're all wrapped up?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, just two things. I sent you all an email yesterday about trying to schedule a meeting for Tuesday night, the 25th. And I think at least one or two of you haven't responded yet, so double check your email. We're trying to get another in for the middle housing code amendments. And then Commissioner Ramey, I wanted to bring up the letter that you are planning to present to the City Council Monday night at their public forum at 7:30. And it's the letter that you all talked about, I think, just yesterday. Commissioner Ramey will have 3 minutes. And so he's got a couple of options. He can summarize the letter in 3 minutes, or others can join him. And the nice thing about being a commissioner is that you get to come to the front of the line at a public forum. But Commissioner Ramey, maybe I can let you talk more about that particular item. I just wanted to make sure we covered it.
Yeah, I think you did cover it. I was just concerned that the entirety of the letter is probably longer than 3 minutes. And so I was going to summarize it, and I was trying to tactfully suggest that maybe the staff could summarize it. But the suggestion that two of us present, the only complication there is obviously one of the person has to show up. And then the letter has to somehow be, cut up, who gets A and who gets B. But that's, if there were any volunteers who wanted to join me on the evening of the 24th. I think in particular our leadership team, I can't remember what we call them now, our liaisons. If either of those
resources. Other resources.
I think there's only 2 of you here tonight, but if either of you wanted to join, that would be appropriate. Or frankly, I can work to summarize it and get it into 3 minutes. Either way.
I could do that. I'm sitting here trying to imagine if the entire letter can be read in 6 minutes.
I think so.
You think so? And you think that's a good idea?
I would actually ask Commissioner Edwards, what is your experience in how many typed words you can get in 3 minutes? It's like a page, right?
Well, the last time I testified, I did get cut off right in the middle of a sentence. But I will say I'm usually, I practice it. We usually get cut off to 2, just depending on how many people are there. I'm going to be there for other reasons. So if there's interest, if it needs 3 of us to each have a chunk, then I'm happy. Just let me know. I'm happy to help and read a piece or whatever. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to assume that the 2 of you have volunteered, and I will look at the letter and try to figure out how to cut it into 3 parts. I think that'd be wonderful if we each spoke about it.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. Why don't you cut it into 3 parts and we'll communicate. I assume we can communicate by email and have our parts ready.
Yep, I think so. And Commissioner Edwards, does that mean you only get 1 3-minute spot, right? So are we chewing up your other time?
No, I'm not there to testify, but I have others there that are going to speak at the forum. So I'm just going to sit in and listen. So.
All right, terrific. So Commissioner Isaacson patiently waiting. Yes.
Well, I will say I'm glad to see there's a relay race now. We're going to do the baton between the speeches. That's curious. I actually did have one thing I wanted to ask about from the Hawthorne appeal, the first one. Can we make sure the staff has all the details related to that 20-foot road? That seems to be a lot of information that is being centered around that fact. What constitutes a road for commercial use, if there is such a thing? We have a lot of questions around that, so to be able to have as much information as possible. And then the other question I have is, this is probably for staff, is what constitutes information that would be known to the hearings officer, in other words, like Street View, if Street View would be available to him or her, if that's available to us at the hearing. We can't physically go out there, but Street View can. So that kind of thing.
Commissioner Isaacson, I can jump in on that second question.
I'm assuming no.
That's usually what that means.
Yeah.
So as planning commissioners, you should have before you staff should have given you the record, the information that was placed before the hearings official and that she considered when she was making her decision. And she identified that in her decision too. There's a little bit of a narrative about what she looked at. If it is something that is not within the kind of the four corners of that record, then it's new evidence. So you need to limit yourself to that chunk of material.
I'll just add that we do intend to bring back more information about where you can find details around that road segment in the record. So we'll draw upon existing record materials to the best of our ability to help develop that picture for you, so to speak.
Okay, that's good. Yes, Commissioner Taylor.
I'm just curious when staff will have the response to the second appeal. As you described, there was some, sorry, Nick, I know you're trying to race to your microphone. Thank you.
My hope is by end of day Friday. I would shoot for that.
Okay. Anything else from commissioners or staff? All right, with that, I'm going to close this meeting and bid you all adieu until we meet again. Thank you all for your time. It's been a fun 2 days.